Okay, so first let us look at what is antiquarianism. So there are some words which we use often in daily discussions, conversations, and also sometimes in academic discussions and conversations. That word is antique, antique, antiquary, antiquity, antiquarian, antiquarianism. These are five words. Maybe since you can't see, you can come this side or you come to the front. Okay. Okay. So, which are the five words? These words we use without probably understanding its meaning. Okay. It's a very common word is antique, antiquity, antiquarian, antiquary, antiquarianism. So, the fifth one is antiquarianism that we have to discuss. Now, let's start with the first word. What do you mean by antique? And then antique. What is antique? Hmm? Old. So then what is archaeology? What is antiquity? Okay, fine. If antique, it could be, you might have come across the word antique jewelry. What do you mean by that? Does that mean old jewelry? It's traditional and something which you have been seeing for a very long time, right? In certain particular communities or in certain areas. Okay. So if you go to Gujarat, you will find one kind of jewelry. In Kerala, you will find another kind of jewelry. So it's something like period architecture that we say in architecture. It is what we mean usually in business when we say antique jewelry. This is what we mean. Now, what does the word antiquity mean for archaeologists or for the Archaeological Survey of India or for the state departments of archaeology? They typically use the word antiquity. What do they mean by that? Do you have any idea? No? Any kind of? Okay, means artifacts with some kind of significance, you meant, right? Okay, tell me some artifact which you think is significant. Pottery. All kinds of pottery, redware, local pottery, special pottery. What did you mean? Okay, okay. You have you heard of antiquarian legislations? Antiquarian legislations means the rules, laws which are related to the protection of material culture, that is artifacts, monuments, sites. These are three things, categories in archaeology. You have site, everybody knows what a site is, SITE, archaeological site. And in the site you get two kinds of things. One is a monument, a structure. Okay, monument is a very common word. Structure, more technically speaking, we would call it structures. And then you have artifacts. Okay, these are two major categories of evidence that you get from archaeological sites. You will also get artifacts and ecofacts, metrics, context, all those things are there. But we come across these words only after this classification takes place, and that is that classification that made archaeology a discipline. So, the most important aspect in the journey of archaeology from antiquarianism is the science and the methods of classification. That's the first step or the first stage. Okay. So, that is why we call now antiquity in our legislations. You would have, perhaps you know about the Treasure Trove Act. The Treasure Trove Act, ASI, Archaeological Survey of India Act. You would have come across Ancient Monuments Preservation Act. So one talks about treasure troves and the other one talks about monuments. Then there's a third one which is also very famous. It is called AMASAR, Amasar Act. Ancient Monuments, Antiquities, Sites and Remains Act. So the last one is a comprehensive act. It deals with ancient monuments, antiquities, sites, and remains. It was amended in 2010. So, the word antiquity and its legal meaning that we need to understand, it varies from region to region. For as a case study, we will be taking what it means or what it includes in India, in the Indian context. Normally, when we are excavating a site or exploring a site, you will be collecting artifacts. You will be creating a record. That record is known as archaeological record. Uh, there will be antiquities in that. So those are things like coins, metal objects, all metal objects, gold, silver, bronze, copper, iron. Rare items, non-local, foreign items which are very rare in very few in number, a special kind of pottery, coins I already said, inscriptions. Okay, so these are copper plates. These are some of the examples of antiquity. And in an excavation, you have to maintain a register known as antiquity register, in which you will record all these things. You will write the date that you collected it, the trench, the layer, the depth, the context, remarks, dimensions, etc. To make it very simple, I would say that when John Marshall was the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, we know Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were excavated. Now, this year is very significant. We remember him more because this was announced in 1924. 1924. So, in the Illustrated London News, the discovery of Harappan civilization was announced. That was in September 1924. So now this last September was 100 years. So obviously you would have seen there's a lot of media attention, popular attention, public attention towards the 100 years of the discovery and the studies related to Harappa. So imagine the antiquity register of Mohenjo-daro in 1920, 21 and up to 24. DR Sahni, Dayaram Sahni and all were excavating there. A bronze figurine, a female figurine is found. Many bronze female figurines were found in the course of the excavation, and one was written or recorded as the dancing girl. Okay, male figurines made of different materials were found, including steatite, and that was recorded as the priest king. So, antiquity, I hope you would have understood what is the significance of an antiquity register. So, antique, antiquity. Now, looking at three words and similar words: antiquary, antiquarian, antiquarianism. There was a society of antiquary. It was a society like the other society that we know, the Royal Asiatic Society of Bengal in Calcutta. That was also a society founded in 1784 by William Jones. We know what are the contributions of RASB to Indian archaeology. So, the Society of Antiquary was there in Europe. Um, there is a very famous journal in England, one of the most famous journals in the discipline of archaeology is Antiquity. Okay, the name of the journal is Antiquity. Then uh, there is another society of antiquarians. The name of that society is in Italy, and the name of the society is Dilettantis. Dilettantis. So, dilettantism is also a phase within antiquarianism, which is a very long phase before the development of modern archaeology. Okay, so this is the introduction that I would like to give for antiquarianism. Okay, is there some clarity required at this point? Okay, so then let us look at the definition: the study of ancient artifacts, manuscripts, sites for historical and cultural value. It could be historical value, it could be cultural value. It is a study of artifacts, manuscripts, and sites. Okay, so it could be a prehistoric site, it could be a site related to Egyptian civilization, it could be a site related to Ashoka, Mauryan period, it could be any site. The major difference between antiquarianism and archaeology is, in archaeology, as I said before, there is a scientific classification of the record or of the archaeological data towards the aim of interpretation and study. Whereas in antiquarian phase, there is more of collection. The collection is not organized. Collection is there. Okay. Okay. So now we are in Europe. This all this is happening in Europe during the period of Renaissance, from 15th, 16th centuries. We know there were a lot of scholars after the fall of Constantinople, how they shifted, and they rediscovered the classical texts, the classical period inscriptions, and the ruins, art. Okay, in antiquity, one of the most important things are sculptures, statues, vigrahangal, the Nataraja statue, the bronze, Chola bronzes. These are examples of antiquities. That is why you cannot take them outside the country. It's against the law. That is why you come across news that these bronzes have been returned by some uh, museums or private collectors back to India. Okay, we come across that in the news once a while. So, during the period of Renaissance, there is an interest in the classical texts. classical art, classical epics, particularly Roman Greek. Roman and Greek civilization we are talking about. So, Iliad, Odyssey, all these are the examples of the Greek epics. So, all these things are revisited by the scholars during Renaissance in Europe, particularly in Italy. So, there is a reference to humanism more than God, thinking about human contributions, thinking about the human touch, thinking about rather than the divine touch, and about how the society is changing. These are the features of humanism. So, antiquarianism grew from humanist interest in the past and revival of ancient knowledge. Okay, so now let us look at the key periods. We all know about Petrarch, 14th century, who rediscovered many classical manuscripts and kindled an interest in translating those, reading those, study of ancient scripts, collection of art, etc. So, one word is very important in this phase, that is collecting. Collection is very important. So, people are traveling, they read the text, they get hooked to the classical civilizations. So they want to travel. So they travel to to visit the ruins of ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and at some point of time they cross the sea, Mediterranean they cross, and then they are reaching Egypt. They are reaching Egypt, the pyramids, the Sphinx. They are making sketches of it. They are discovering these monuments. They are reporting these monuments. They are collecting art pieces or pillars from there. All these things are brought into the private collections, and later these private collections become a comes. It is donated or gifted to a university, or a society is created, and then it is slowly opened to the public. So these private collections were or individual collections gradually were opened to the public. Now we move on to the next phase, that is Enlightenment phase, the 17th and 18th century. We see that there is a, it is not only collection that is happening. Collection is growing, of course, but there is a systematic recording of history and the development of museums. So, enlightenment, two features. One is systematic recording. Systematic recording means recording the context, recording depth, recording all details about it, recording your observations, recording the background. So, sometimes also known as total recording. So, this systematic recording and the development of museums. Museum means it is open to the public for view. Before that, there were personal collections, individual collections, private collections, usually by kings, by rich businessmen, by nobles, by travelers. Okay, these are some of the people who were the initial antiquarians. So, this is a very important phase. Now, in this phase, we see that the study is not confined to classical Greece and Rome. Instead, in Europe, people are looking at their own national treasures, national monuments. Okay, there's a rise of nation states. So at that time, people start looking, basically, we can say, looking in your own backyard. And you start finding material there and trying to understand what is a purpose and what is a meaning of those things, collection of those things. That is the second phase. So what we actually see is that initial collection is something that comes from faraway places, and it is only in the second phase that you start collecting material which is closer home, and that too because of the rise of nationalism throughout Europe, the rise of nation states throughout Europe. So in this period that we come across the reporting of monuments in various parts of Europe. In England, we come across uh, monuments like Stonehenge. You would have come across megalithic monuments, prehistoric megaliths. That is the Stonehenge, Afbury, etc. These were uh, reported and recorded and published. Three things took place. They were reported first, then it was recorded, the site was recorded, documented, can be, could be another word that could, recorded, and then it was published. When it is published, more people can read. Okay. Now, John Aubrey was one person, very important person, and also Stuckley was also responsible for the initial study of British antiquarianism. Okay, now we look at another John, Johann Winkelmann, 18th century, who founded modern art history. So what we see is out of antiquarianism, two branches are emerging. One is archaeology and the other one is art history. Okay, whatever is related to art, that is being, uh, studied by art history, and whatever remains, all those things which has got a historical uh, evidence, all kinds of historical other remains, they are studied under archaeology. So the focus here was on classical art, that means the Greek and the Roman art. So now we are in the 19th century. This is the most important century in the history of or the growth of archaeology, the 19th century. In the 19th century, there is a movement from collection to modern discipline. We started with collection. So, from amateur collectors to modern archaeology, amateur to professional, collection to study and research. That is a major difference that took place in the 19th century. So, there are quite a few people responsible within the field of archaeology and also from other disciplines, natural history as well as humanism. From both areas, there were a lot of people who were responsible for the uh, development of modern archaeology in the 19th century. Now, one person we have to remember, his name is C.J. Thompson. C.J. Thompson, and we know him because of his classification, which is known as three age system. Okay, so in the 19th century, there were huge changes in three areas. One was prehistory, the second one was evolutionary biology, which you know, Charles Darwin and all, and the third one is geology. So, a lot of changes or contributions take place in these three fields: prehistory, biology, and geology. Now, why is prehistory so significant? Because 99% of human past falls in prehistory. Okay. And this evolution of tools, technological evolution of tools, is what is meant by the 3H system. So, this evolution idea is actually borrowed from the biology evolution idea by Charles Darwin. And also you are finding these in layers, and the study of layers or strata or stratigraphy is borrowed from geology. So these three things are interrelated. I hope this is clear. Okay, in the 20th century you have lot of contributors to. In the 20th century, it's archaeology is in its full swing. Okay, Atkinson, Cookson, Kenyon, Kathleen Kenyon, who was working in Levant and West Asia, Crawford, Wheeler, who worked in India, Mortimer Wheeler, who was the last British Governor General of the Archaeological Survey of India. He was in India from 1944 to 48. It's famous for excavations like Brahmagiri, Arikkamedu, Taxila, etc. And then the other person is also very famous, Gordon Child. So maybe the first four names may not be very familiar to you, but I'm sure you have heard and read Mortimer Wheeler and Gordon Child. Okay, so now let us move on to the last person in this group. Let us try to understand the journey from antiquarianism to archaeology in the words of Child. Now, who is Gordon Child? We know he's an archaeologist. He's an Australian archaeologist. Within archaeology, he specializes in prehistory. Within prehistory, he specializes in European prehistory. By his political leanings, he is a socialist. Okay, and he's a, if you talk about theory, then we identify him as Marxist archaeologist, because he is the one who coined the term agricultural revolution. Now this idea is now being reconsidered. Okay, there is a very strong school within archaeology which says that Neolithic agriculture was not a sudden revolution, but it was a gradual transition from hunting, gathering, foraging to plant domestication and agriculture. So the idea of the revolution is reconsidered now. But still, that does not mean Child's contributions can be dismissed. His ideas have been revisited because of the evidence that we get of late about the Neolithic from different parts of the world, including from Kerala, would help us. Some things we are not able to understand. So, in that case, you need to revisit the ideas that exist, and then when we look at the data or the archaeological record, then we find that agriculture is not something that happens one fine morning. It takes a lot of time, it gradually evolves. There are many stages, there are regional differences, okay, conditions, availability of raw material, availability of water, so many, ideal climate, the sudden changes in climate. All this leads to technological change, and Neolithic is one stage in the long stage of human technology, the last stage in prehistory. And how did that transition take place? That is also being reconsidered and revised now. Okay. So revolution, And then he is also very famous for his quotation, rivers are the cradles of civilizations. We all have studied, though we did not perhaps know that child said this first in his book. So, to not only to know your subject, but also to present it well matters a lot if you have to make an impact after so many generations. So, rivers are the cradles of civilizations is one of his very famous, oft repeated statement. He was a voracious reader and he was a very continuous writer. He kept on revising his own ideas. So, some of the books are The Story of Tools, very simple titles, we can say. The Story of Tools, Society and Knowledge, Man Makes Himself. Very humanist idea we can see here. Man makes himself. What happened in history? You would have heard of what is history. What happened in history? What all happened in history? How do we find out what happened in history? Okay. The dawn of European civilization. Now, what do you mean by dawn? Is it the prehistoric? When you say dawn, it means a beginning, right? So basically, it's about European prehistory. I said within prehistory, he specialized in European prehistory. So the dawn of European civilization. This is a very famous book, Dawn of European Civilization. Social evolution. That is another book. And then the prehistory of European society. So these are the different books which he has authored. There are many more. So now let us look at what is archaeology, the making of a discipline. What is archaeology as a discipline? We are trying to look at it from child's perspective first, and then we'll be slowly moving on to the later stages. Up to child 20th century, we will be discussing based on this, and then after that we will be continuing. Okay, so child says that there are lot of manuals of archaeology available in the market. Manuals, which means it tells you what is the principles of archaeology, what are the basics of archaeology. Those are called manuals, handbook types. And they are what kind of description is given? Very lucid, very clear, and very vivid. Vivid means explains well, it's very visual. Archaeology is quite visual because you are dealing with material culture. Okay, so lucid and vivid manuals of archaeology were produced during this period. And the job of archaeology was four primarily. One is to identify what you get. When you get a coin, to identify it is a Chera coin or a Chola coin or a Shatavahana coin or a punch marked coin. So that identification is an important aspect of archaeology. The second one is to recover without destroying, damaging, you have to recover it. So, recovering is a second uh, phase. First, you identify, then you recover what you identify. But you also have to recover what you don't identify or you can't identify. Because at some point of time, we will have enough knowledge to understand what has been collected. So, collection and total recording. This is what is meant by recording. Scientific recording means you record what you know, what you don't know. So, you use a standard procedure to write. In the register, you will always document it in a particular way. Okay, you need to use common terms. Otherwise, nobody will understand what you have written. For example, if all the medical doctors use the same terms, right? That is why when you move from, say, you have to go to a specialist and you move from a physician to a specialist, your records would be consulted by the physician, by the specialist doctor. That doctor will be still able to understand without you saying anything, because it is written there, and that is a language which he understands, he or she understands. So that is the terminologies and standardization in terminology. These are features of disciplines. Okay, so there are common standard procedures are there. That is why it is called a manual. So there are enough manuals available in those days in archaeology, which helped people identify, helped people recover, then record. Recording is very important, and then finally to conserve what you get. Conservation is important. Okay, so do you think these are the four duties of archaeology today? Or do you think there is a fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, or some other? Can you share your ideas? Hmm? Are these the four dimensions of archaeology? Interpretation is there, yes. Then what else is there? Research. So interpretation, analysis, dating, all those things are there, no? That is one form of analysis. Dating is one method that is used for analysis. It is broadly, it might come under identify. And if you have to, what do you record? What do you record? We record what we know. So we know that there are two dimensions in archaeology. One is the spatial and the other one is the temporal, that is space and time. So the first two things that you record, one is space and the other one is time. Dating is what helps you to understand the time. And when you go visit a site and then you record the locational details of the site, the coordinates, the altitude, the terrain, geomorphological features, the climatic features, environmental conditions, that helps you to spatially locate the landscape within which the site is part of. So these are the various dimensions that we deal with in archaeology. These are four common things that are done, or we can say these are the visible things that are done. You imagine an archaeologist, you will imagine somebody visiting the field, right? So in the field, people will be going, visiting sites, identifying material, picking up, recovering or collecting material, then recording that material, and then taking it back to the lab and conserving it. So these are four common aspects, but there is much more to archaeology. Now, the second step after doing these four things, the next step is to classify the collections. Classify the collections. Now, how do you classify? You need to use some logic. You need to use certain methods. You will use certain theories. For example, when you say I am classifying on the basis of technology, that is my theory. Technological evolution is my theory. So that is what I am trying to look at. That is my paradigm. That is my framework. And I am working within that framework. Okay, so that theory helps to build the frame within which we will work. Okay, so you need a frame to begin with. And what do? You extract, these are the words of child, okay? You extract history from this data. This data is there. Evidence, facts do not speak for themselves, right? So this data is there. You need to extract that human agency, the archaeologist or the scholar will have to extract history from this data. Who does that? So, see, in the time of child is coining a term. What is a term? Professional archaeologist. That means there are archaeologists who are not professional at that time. Okay, so we are not even thinking about the antiquarian phase when there was no word known as archaeology. There was no profession known as archaeologist. There was no discipline known as archaeology. And by the time of God and Child, he is talking about different categories of archaeologists, and he is referring to one category as very professional, those who are doing it, practicing it as a profession. It could be academic profession, it could be some other profession. Okay, so that word is used by him. And he says, how do you know that the person standing in front of you is a professional archaeologist? So he says they will give technical meanings. They will use technical terms, they will write technical terms, and they will give technical meanings. So same words are repeated, and those words will have a peculiar meaning, and that word is used in that particular meaning only. Okay, so these are the things that he says made archaeology a discipline. Okay, okay. Now we come to the question of discipline and sub-disciplines, or discipline and branches within the discipline. So archaeology and sub-disciplines of archaeology, archaeology and branches of archaeology. So Child cautions in the beginning itself, archaeology is one, it has many branches. So the technical terms that you use is the same, it is one only. The discipline is one, but it has many branches. This we are talking about the times of Child. At that time, what was the nature of the discipline of archaeology? So he says basically there are two things that you can see in archaeology. Prehistorian we have already seen, no? When we talk about the evolution of archaeology from antiquarianism, there are three things. One is prehistory, the second one is evolutionary biology, and the third one is geology. Okay, so prehistory is an important aspect of archaeology. Prehistoric archaeology is the branch of archaeology unaided by text. So basically, archaeology is text aided archaeology and unaided archaeology unaided by text. These are the two categories. Text aided archaeology is a term that usually refers to what we say as historical archaeology. So now we say prehistory and history, two categories, prehistory and history. Prehistory is unaided with text, and history is text aided. So now he moves on to talk about what are the concepts about archaeology. One concept is it is a mere illustration of written history. History is written down. We know about Ashoka from the Ashokan inscriptions. We know about Ashoka from Jatakas. We know about him from the Divyavatana, Ashokavadana, Pali texts, Pali chronicles. So there are a lot of textual references to Ashoka. Okay, but how do Ashoka look like? How did he look like? This man, this ruler who ruled one of the vast areas in 3rd century BC. Don't you want to know how he looked like? If so much is written about him, okay, so that is a visual representation of or illustration of written history is found when in the along with the inscription we find a sculpture where this king is shown with the queen. Okay. Ashoka Raya. Raya instead of Raja in those days. In the edicts, it is mentioned as Raya. Though the term Ashoka is not appearing very frequently in the Ashokan inscriptions. So the text cannot be, whatever is written in the text, you cannot expect in the field. These are two different categories of sources, two different categories of evidence. Okay. It is the archaeological record is not something that is according to the script, like it is written and then you are going to um, keep all those things. It's not like that. So we can use it to corroborate each other, to support each other. We can use. So is archaeology a mere illustration of written history? Child asks. Or is archaeology an autonomous or an independent source of history? It is independent. It can be with text free also. Even when text is available, you will be able to say many things without using the text. Okay, because 99% of uh, human past you're dealing without text. So here is a discipline which is designed to understand the past by looking at material remains. Okay, so even if the text is not available, it can independently become a source of history. So then Child says there are some very popular categories among the archaeologists in his times. He himself considered himself was considered as a prehistorian. Then there were people who were dealing with the early historic period. So they called themselves Romanists. Rome. So Romanists. And then of course after the Rome, medieval. So medievalists. So the three broad categories in his time, at least in Europe, were the prehistorians, the Romanists, and the medievalists. Then he comes out with an excellent statement saying that archaeological record is a fossilized record of human behavior. It is a fossil. This fossil of human behavior, past human behavior. Something which is familiar to us by the term cognitive archaeology, which was coined by uh, Colin Renfrew, who passed away 1 month ago. The very famous British archaeologist Colin Renfrew. Maybe he is most famous because of his one book, particularly in India. It is a textbook. His Archaeology, Theory, Methods and Practice. That is a title of the book, written by uh, Renfrew and Paul Barn. So we were discussing contextual um, archaeology and cognitive archaeology. So archaeological record is a record of past human behavior. Now what is this past human behavior? That is a past culture. This is a culture. So basically archaeology is dealing with culture studies. And the method that or the phase of archaeology, this particular phase of archaeology is the culture historical phase, which tries to study cultures, which tries to study history. So, the culture historical method. Now, in archaeology, the basic classification is called type or typology. So, whenever you get 50 or 10 things, you have to classify it. Okay? For example, maybe if we are doing an activity, I normally ask students to do this activity. How many of you are there here? 6, 11. 11 are here, right? You have got 11 pens with you. Okay, imagine that's an artifact. Okay. Hmm? Collect all the pens. You will get 11 pens. And then you classify it. Okay. So, how will you classify it? You can imagine, no? Or do you want to do it? Huh? Should we do it, ma'am? Since it's being recorded, I'm asking. I mean, you can do it? Okay. Okay, then please collect. Keep it here. And then each of you, maybe two of you can come to same time. And then you use your own logic to classify it. These are the artifacts. Imagine these are artifacts, okay? So typology is something that you can apply. The same thing you can apply in pottery. Yeah, you can also come. Please come together and then you decide how you are going to classify. നിങ്ങൾ ഇത് ക്ലാസ് ആയിട്ട് തിരിക്കണം. ജസ്റ്റ് ഇത് മുഴുവൻ കൂടി നമുക്ക് പഠിക്കണമെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് ക്ലാസ് ആയിട്ട് തിരിക്കണം. ഓക്കെ. അപ്പൊ എന്താണ് നിങ്ങളുടെ ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷന്റെ ഒരു ലോജിക് പ്രിൻസിപ്പിൾ എന്താണ്? Color, ink in the color. Okay, so thank you. So this is first type of classification in which they have divided it on the basis of the color. So there are two categories, two types. One type is blue pen and the other one is black pen. Now the next two can come and use another classification. Okay, not the same. Come. There will be many ways in which you can classify, not just one way. Yes, what is your logic? Then the company. Ah, ഇതൊക്കെ ഏതാ? This is one company. All of them belong to one company, and this are ആ കമ്പനി അല്ലാത്ത എല്ലാം കൂടി അനദർ കാറ്റഗറി. ഓക്കെ. ഓക്കെ, സോ നമുക്ക് അനദർ സെറ്റ് ഓഫ് ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷൻ വന്നൂടെ. ഓക്കെ, this here they have gone by the factory or company. Okay, so they found that four are by one company. So they divided that into two groups, one of that company and the other one which is not that company. All those things, miscellaneous, everything is put together. So you see there are five like that and there are four here. Only 9 are there. 11 are not there, I suppose. How many? Only 9 pens are there. Who has not given the pen? Okay. Hmm? Okay, fine, no problem. So this is the second type of classification that we had. So let's try your logic. The next team, both of you, please come. Yeah. Kanya. There are four categories. Two categories. What ഇതെന്താ ഇതിന്റെ ഷേപ്പാ ദെൻ ദിസ് ഇതെന്താ വ്യത്യാസം ഇതും തമ്മിൽ എന്താ വ്യത്യാസം ഏഹ് വ്യത്യാസമുണ്ട് ഇതെന്താ ഇതൊക്കെ റൗണ്ടഡാണ് ഏഹ് അപ്പൊ ഇതോ okay that means this is one particular type all of them have got the same name okay all of them same company see a pen yeah very good okay thank you see a pen has got one company right and then it also has got a model so they have taken two categories they not only took the uh, company the company which makes a pen they also classified a finer classification you can say see how you start with a basic classification and then you gradually move on to finer classifications as you get more and more um, data you will have to go in for finer classifications to make meaning out of it. To begin with, you need only basic classifications like 3H system, So that doesn't mean that the basic classification changes. There will be minor changes in the, sometimes there will be a major change, but usually there is a slight change only. Okay. So I think the other two, you want to do the classification? No. Okay. So you can distribute these back. Okay, so we have understood how classification takes place. Okay, the same method can be used when you are working with pottery, for example. You will divide them according to ware, black ware, red ware. Okay, black and red ware, grey ware, four categories. Then you will make fine within red ware, fine red ware, coarse red ware. Suppose you are working with coarse wares only, then you will pick up, you will divide it into two. One is fine ware and the other one is courseware. Now, if you're dealing with details of courseware, then you will use very specific scientific methods in order to understand the grain size. And then based on that geological methods, you will be dividing them into different fabrics, A, B, C, like that. Okay, that is how you do these kind of classifications are done this way. I'll give you one example from one case study from a archaeological site in Kerala. The name of the site is Kottapuram Fort. Do you know where Kottapuram is? It is otherwise known as Kodungalur Fort. Kodungalur Fort. Okay. So excavation is taking place as part of the Muziris Heritage Project. I think this was in 2010. And in 2010, around 10 trenches were there. So, two trenches were outside the fort wall. So, after the wall, you have the river. Okay. So, two were closer to the river. Rest all were inside the fort. So, basically we were trying to understand the bastion. You understand what is a bastion? Bastion is a projection that you have in the fort, because it to strengthen. And the person who was in charge of that trench, he collected all the material. Everything was labeled. Everything was stored, everything was bagged, and everything was written. So my job was to go around all the trenches, find out what is here, what is there. Because everybody is working in trenches, individual trenches. They wouldn't know what is happening in the other trenches. So the person who is in charge of all this would go around and tell them, see, which level are you in? You are in this level? Okay, we are getting something similar from that other trench. Okay, so that is how you try to relate and give the history of the entire site. Otherwise, you will be getting history of each trench. Okay, you need to combine this knowledge in order to get the site details. So then we collected all these materials and then the excavation is over. So what is the next step? The next step is known as post excavation analysis. So for that you have to collect this material which is already categorized. Okay, pottery is there, and some classifications within pottery is also done. Preliminary classification is done. Then you have bones, you have glass, you have nails, you have some other iron objects. All those things are collected. Tiles, all those things are there. Now, from this particular trench, we got some uh, teeth. We got teeth. So we were wondering, why are we getting so much of teeth from one trench? That too outside the trench. Okay, we are not getting teeth from any other trench. We are getting teeth from one trench outside the trench, that area. So we couldn't understand why we are getting. So we assumed, you need a hypothesis to begin with. So what was our hypothesis? Our hypothesis was this was a kind of a, dump. So the material was dumped from here, there, and that is why we are finding it. Okay. So now we need to collect this and we have to do a study of this, analysis of this. So everybody took whatever they knew about and then nobody picked up these teeth. So now it was on me to pick up these teeth, and we don't have a bioarchaeologist on the team. So that means we will have to contact somebody. So, but then a bioarchaeologist would be happy or would expect if you have done some preliminary classification of what material you've got. The more info that we can give them, the better would be their interpretation and analysis. Okay. So, now I had to take it to a dentist to find out what this is. So I imagine myself going to a very busy dentist, going with some old teeth in different plastic hours. I did not get a very good vibe about it. So I kept it. Then I found that one of my niece, she is a BDS student. Okay. So one day I went to her house. So I told her slowly that I have got some old teeth with you. Would you like to see it? So she said, yes, I would like to see the teeth. And then, so I mean, so she was little bit scared when I said, you can actually tell me something about it. She said, no, I don't know anything about it. I'm just a student. I don't know anything. So I told her, you know better than me. That is what is important at this stage. Even if what you say is wrong, we can get it corrected. But to make a preliminary classification, can you help me? That is what I asked. So we sat and she had a book with her, a thick book was there. She would keep consulting that book and then she made two classifications. She classified the whole thing into two. So I asked her, what is the basis of this? So she said, these many are human teeth, these are not. So that is the first classification that you make. So suppose there are 10 or 11 pen you had, then there are 11 teeth. 5 of them are human, 6 are non-human. So we removed that because we are dealing with human teeth. This person can identify only or study more or tell more about human teeth only. The other one has to go to the archaeozoologist now. Okay, so imagine without this preliminary classification, if you take this to a zoologist, that person is also going to find it difficult because you are giving them material which should have gone somewhere else. It is like giving your Amazon packet goes to another house and their packet comes to your house. It can be very confusing. So this preliminary classification is very important in the understanding or in the furtherance of our knowledge about the past. And then the second category was, first, once the initial is done, you start feeling and handling the material and you know the context because you have picked it up. Then we can do further, we can do justice to it. For example, the next classification would be talking about how many are premolar, molar, canine, incisor teeth, tooth, etc. Another classification would be whether it is the lower jaw or the upper jaw, mandible, maxilla. These are the terms that are used. Okay. Another category could be whether it is male or female. Another category could be whether it is adult or child. Another category could be whether it denotes some disease, some nutritional deficiency or not. So you can say so many things from the teeth. Today you can also do DNA studies. You can identify the DNA, the details about the genetic details of the person to whom this tooth belongs to. You can also date because it's an organic this thing. So you can use certain organic dating methods such as carbon 14, which are done. Only thing, you have to collect the sample accordingly. You cannot handle it physically and then you will get a contaminated date or a wrong date. Okay, so I hope you have understood how this classification actually takes place on the field and after the excavation in the lab. Okay, so this classification is very important. Material culture is broadly divided as relics, monuments, and environmental ecofacts, for example. Now, there is one chapter in Child's book titled "How Young is Archaeology," which means archaeology is a very young discipline. It is a very young discipline. It's not an old discipline. Now, interesting quotation is archaeology is an unstable hybrid. It is a hybrid. It is unstable because it is young and it is in the frontier area. Archaeology is in the frontier area between the social sciences and the natural sciences. So it has borrowed from the, it's a hybrid created out of social sciences and natural sciences. Now, Glyn Daniel came out with a book, 100 Years of Archaeology. This book was published in 1950, so 1850 to 1950. Now, what happened from 1850 onwards? We are not saying 1850, that year has got any particular significance. The second half of the 19th century. The theory of evolution came during this period. Excavations took place at Herculaneum, Pompeii, and the glamour of Rome. The glamour of Rome. Then in Egypt, Egyptology, you have Rosetta Stone, deciphered by Champollion. England, France, North Europe, antiquaries societies are Society of Antiquity or antiquarians are at work. There is the Gothic revival, that is medieval architecture. Gothic revival is there. Romantic movement is there. In English, French, and German circles. So all these things put together defines the 100 years of archaeology, particularly the first 50 years, 1850 to 1900. Okay, so Glyn Daniel and Child's statements about archaeology would uh, help us understand how young archaeology is, even in the 1950s. Okay, so now we will be looking at detail about C.J. Thompson and classification and the culture historical phase in archaeology. This is a phase when focus was on monuments and curiosities. Curiosities, curious, things which are very attractive, curiosities. Now let us look at monuments. Previously we have seen Avebury and Stonehenge. Compared to the glamour of Rome, the word that he used. Compared to the glamour of Rome, these Stonehenge and such other monuments, the results were not spectacular. It was not a spectacle compared to the Egyptian civilization, compared to the Roman civilization, the Greek civilization. The results were not spectacular, but they had sentimental value and patriotic appeal. So these are the other aspects of archaeology. Suddenly we are emerging out of the antiquarian phase where everything was based on attraction, curiosity, collection, beauty, aesthetics to patriotism nationalism, sentimental, emotional, ideology, identity, etc. The megaliths found in Stonehenge, they were referred to as rude stone monuments. The same thing, that is how the megaliths are initially reported in India also by the British officials like Medus Taylor. They use the word rude stone monuments. See, the most important word here is rude, rude or crude. So there is a this kind of an idea that the other one is evolved and it is stylized and it is art, it is sophisticated, it is civilization, and this is crude, this is rude, rude stone monuments. Now, antiques. There were antique collections that continued. Despite all this is happening in one side and the other one is happening on the other side. Okay. So, these antiques continued to be accumulating in the royal museums and in the private museums. There were miscellaneous curiosities. That is, some things which, when you classified, there was the second group classified it into two. One was a particular brand, a known company, and the other one was a no miscellaneous, all put together, mixed bag. So, like that, you have antiques which are already recorded, known, uh, and what you understand, and the other one is miscellaneous group, miscellaneous curiosities. Let us go to Scandinavia in Europe. The Scandinavian countries like Denmark, Norway, and such other countries. In Scandinavia, a person, his name is C.J. Thompson, and he is a curator in the National Museum of Denmark. That is in Copenhagen, that is the capital of Denmark now. So there was a king, a monarch, and this was a royal collection, and C.J. Thompson was appointed as a curator, and he had to put up an exhibition. So now this classification, which is very important, which was a turning point in the history of archaeology, was actually a classification which was made for an exhibition by C.J. Thompson. In 1816, he divided it into three ages. The first one is a Stone Age, second one is the Bronze Age, and the third one is Iron Age. Gradually, this system seemed to be universally applicable, so it was spread throughout Europe. This was a naturalistic classification blended with the humanist. So this was a evolutionary classification which was influenced by the ideas of evolution in biology. So kinds of evolution, biological evolution and cultural evolution. So this is very clearly the culture historical method. Cultural evolution is what is discussed here. So the naturalistic classification idea was borrowed into a humanistic or social science realm. That is what happened in the case of 3H system. Instead of dynastic names, technomic names were given. Instead of giving dynastic names, stone, bronze, iron, these terms were given. So there is this emphasis on technology. So you can always remember this because stone is the oldest, bronze comes after, and then iron comes third. Now, so that technological evolution is etched in our minds as a result of this. And then gradually further classifications or finer classifications take place. So in 1865, John Lubbock in England divided the Stone Age into Paleolithic and Neolithic. Interestingly, Mesolithic was coined later. It was first divided into two. Usual first classifications, initial classifications are normally two, and then later on further classifications come up. Like for example, prehistory, history, and later we have something in between, a transition known as proto-history. Okay, and now this is the German word for culture. He said culture historical method. The German museum, Mortile, classified the prehistoric section or the Stone Age in that museum into 6 periods based on stratigraphy. So he used the strata, then each strata he classified it into 6 periods. So now, first it was Iron Stone Age, then it became Paleolithic and Neolithic, and then it became 6 periods based on stratigraphy. Now, this person was trained in natural history, not the classics. Many people were trained in ancient Greek and Roman art, the antiquarians particularly. But here we have people trained in natural history, not in classics. So, this is another area where archaeology is elaborating into or moving on to. Okay, he was, stratigraphy is a principle borrowed from geology. So that means he had interest in geology. He read geology a lot. This is what makes archaeology very interdisciplinary. Because from the beginning we see that it is always at the frontier, and it is, borrowing from both the social sciences and the natural sciences. When DNA studies are started, DNA studies are implemented in ADNA, ancient DNA. Okay, so now the Harappan studies, we have DNA studies. Okay, in the beginning we had culture historical studies, now we have DNA studies are happening in these sites. So constantly borrowing from the social sciences and the natural sciences, and new things are emerging like the out of India theory, for example. So from the Aryan invasion theory, which was rejected, then the Aryan migration theory, constantly these things are being revised because of the dates. What you would have studied as 300 BC is now becoming 1000 BC. The antiquity of iron has been pushed back. The antiquity of um, Harappan is becoming later. So eventually these things may become very continuous. So these are the different theories. When our models are different, when our theories are different, then the way in which the record is presented, the data is presented, will be different. Okay, so he was a transformist. He identified himself as a transformist who believed in the transformation, the gradual transformation of culture, and he presented it as stages of evolution. There is constant idea, this idea of human progress is there, and then there are different stages in that progress, the stages of evolution, and that is how he did it. And cultures are named after prominent sites or type sites. This is how nomenclature in archaeology came into being. There are two ways in which cultures are named. One is after a typical material culture, and the second one is named after a typical site. For example, we call Harappan civilization. Why? Why? Because Harappa is the first site to be excavated. Okay, it is also the first site to be reported. Okay, so that is why we refer to it most commonly, though it has got many other names, and even new nomenclatures are coming. But this is the most popular, most common, and least controversial. Why? Because the first one is not likely to change much unless you get some kind of a record which says that before Alexander Cunningham had reported a site named Haryupa, though he did not identify it as a Harappan, a Bronze Age, he identified it more as a stupa. Okay, but then this site is mentioned there, and then John Marshall's period excavations took place there. Okay, so normally it is named after a site. Sometimes it is named after a peculiar kind of um, artifact, say pottery, for example. We are very familiar with that in India, painted grey ware culture, NBPW culture. These are some of the examples that you would come to our mind. Now, he believed in the unilinear evolution. That is, everything begins at one point. From point A, it will travel to point B. From point B to point C, like that. So this is a unilinear evolution theory. But then it was rejected, and then the multilinear evolution theory emerged. So one particular culture begins in site A, then it can move to B and C simultaneously. So that is a multilinear evolution theory. The German prehistorians termed repeating, recurring assemblages as culturen. I don't know how it is pronounced. I suppose it is how it is pronounced in German, which was loosely translated as culture in English. So the most important point is recurring or repeating assemblage. Assemblage means a collection of artifacts or types. Now, another philologist and Germanist, Gustav Cosina, said culture is ethnic and related to specific groups of people. Now, this was very problematic because this led to a lot of racist connotations, which was used by those who were in power, particularly in Germany, and it probably justified some of the genocides which took place. Okay, so Casina is also there. He talked about this, how culture and ethnicity is more or less the same, and culture means it is related to specific groups of people. Now, what is archaeological record? Once a type has been classified by the aid of its context, further specimens of the same type, even when found in isolation, can be assigned to their place and interpreted. So, you have to classify a type. For that, you have to take help of the context. Sometimes strata is one type of context. Now, say for example, from the site of Pattanam in Ernakulam district, you have got a vertical trench. Excavation is happening. I'm talking about 2007, and from that trench at a depth of around 3 meter plus, you're finding a Chera coin, okay, in the layer, and you can date the Chera coin. When you date the Chera coin, all the other artifacts that come from that layer will be dated. This is a kind of relative dating. It belongs to the same period. Now, the next time when you are getting a Chera coin in isolation, for example, you visit a museum and there you see in display a Chera coin, you have understood what is on the obverse of the Chera coin, what is on the reverse of the Chera coin. Okay, so you can classify it as a Chera coin, or based on that you can say what is the period of it. Okay, so only question remains the time. One dimension you have understood, the second dimension you have to find out from where it came, the space. Did it come from Pattanam or did it come from some other site? Okay, say for example Vidinyam, I'm just giving an example. Okay, in that case we can say Vidinyam and Pattanam had a Chera coin. So that means there is some association. This is how the interpretation takes place at the next stage. Now let us give some look at some examples. When you are excavating, you are finding a house or a building. House is a building. You can take any building. Okay. You will have find the floor of the house. You will find the plan of the. You will be able to understand the plan of the house. All the things on the floor and from the foundation of that building onwards will belong to one phase. Okay. For example, suppose you are excavating this room Okay, this floor and this roof and the walls all belong to one context. Okay, all these things are situated within this context. Everything has its place, right? That is how we identify a place. Okay, if now let us go to a we excavate a tomb. What are the things found in a tomb? You'll see grave goods, you will see corpse, that is bones, human bones, teeth you might find. You will find some evidence for rituals. Okay, so all these things belong to one context. Whatever you find within inside the tomb is all the date of the tomb. Okay, the tomb is like the house of the coffin inside which the corpse was kept or was buried. Now, whereas if you are in a collective tomb which was used over generations, then the grave goods will be mixed up. That will present a complicated picture. That will be a little bit complicated for us to understand the context. So from that we can understand if materials are mixed up, then it is most probably a family tomb or a collective burial which has been opened again for certain rituals. For example, if you go to a church and you see a family tomb in the cemetery, have you seen cemetery? Cemetery കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. Family tomb കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. So you will see that many names are written. Okay, so suppose father, grandfather died in 2000. Okay, grandmother died in 2010. So when the grandmother died, all the children they said we must have a family tomb. So they all decided to buy a family tomb, and then their mother, grandmother, was ceremoniously buried in that tomb. Okay. So now you will each tomb will have one tombstone, right? In on the top you will have a stone in which you will write the name of who is buried there, right? So then at that time the children would say, "Now, what about our father who died in 2000? Though he was not buried here, he was buried elsewhere. So shouldn't we add his name as well?" Okay. So first, according to the year of death, normally the tomb gives top will be the first person who died, then second one will be the second person to die, name will be the third person to die and to be buried, right? So on top they will write the name of this father, grandfather. They will write in bracket 1924, that is the year of his birth, 2000, year of his death. Second, only grandmother. Grandmother, for example, born in 1930, died in 2010. So 1930 to 2010. Okay. After some time, so how many bonds, how many burials are actually there? Only one burial. But how many names are on top? Two. Okay. So now how do you date this tombstone? Was a tombstone installed in 2000 or 2010? 2010. So how do you find that out? It could be that there was another tombstone. Say for example, another scenario where in 2000 itself you had a tomb, and really the grandfather was buried there. And then after 10 years, when his wife died, she was also buried there. How do you differentiate between these two? What is the method that you are going to use? So whatever is written may not be true, no? So there you need to use other clues in order to sort of corroborate your idea. Okay. For example, you can look at the style of writing. You can look at the type of stone used. In 2000, the type of stone used, and in 2010, the stone used. The technology of engraving in 2000, technology of engraving in 2010, laser cutting and all that. So these technologies will be different. So based on that, also we can make out a lot of things. So based on the writing on top, there are many things that we can understand about the person who died and the family. It is basically, it is not the dead person who wrote all that. It is his their next generation who wrote all that. Okay. Then his her son dies, passes away. That person is also buried here. Okay. So you will see another type of writing on it. Okay. Slight differences you can make out. One is 2010, so many years old, and now this person dies in 2025. That means 15 years. So when the moment you look at it, you can understand that this particular writing is 15 years older, and this one is new, fresh. So these are the minutest observations and details that you have to observe and record in order to understand the context of, in the case of a collective tomb. Now let us look at hoards, coin hoards, which are found in different parts of Kerala also. Usually, what the kind of logic applied is, all coins were current in the time when the miser hoarded them. This is what child says. Okay, child said, who would hoard it? Only a person who doesn't want to spend will hoard things. Okay, so that means he is a miser. He or she is a miser. പിശുക്കനാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പിശുക്കിയാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അദ്ദേഹം അവർ അതൊക്കെ ഇങ്ങനെ സൂക്ഷിച്ച് ഇങ്ങനെ ഹോർഡായിട്ട് വെച്ചത്. അതുകൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും. അതാണ് ഒരു ഓപ്ഷൻ. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് വൺ പോസിബിലിറ്റി. മറ്റ് പോസിബിലിറ്റീസ് എന്തൊക്കെയാ? ഇതൊരു ഒരു ജ്വല്ലറിയിൽ കുറെ സാധനങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാവില്ലേ? ഒരു ഗോൾഡ് സ്മിത്തിന്റെ കയ്യിൽ ഇപ്പൊ ഗോൾഡ് കോയിൻ ആണെന്ന് വിചാരിക്കൂ. ഗോൾഡ് സ്മിത്തിന്റെ കയ്യിൽ പല കോയിൻസ് ഉണ്ടാവില്ലേ? അത് അയാളത് ഒരു മൈസർ ആയതുകൊണ്ടാണോ അയാൾ അത് സൂക്ഷിക്കുന്നത്? അല്ല, പിന്നെന്തിനാ സൂക്ഷിക്കുന്നത്? മോഡലിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാ? Oh, okay, that could be one. This thing that he wants to copy an old design. You know, recently we had a potter coming to our museum in UC College. So he had come there for a workshop where we will be making pot. So all the students went and made small pots. So then we were talking, and I asked him, "You have been working with pots for 3 generations, and now his son is also in the same field. So 4 generations at least in the same profession." So I asked him, "You would have made so many pottery. Have you seen old pottery?" So he said, "Yes, I have seen those in museums." "Have you touched those pottery?" So he said, "No. Usually, archaeological collections, very few people get to touch." So I invited him to the museum, and then I asked him to feel this, how this is made, and please give your opinion about how it is made. So he will just run his fingers around, and then he can imagine how it is made. He's saying, "See, inside this is like this, so it was probably made like this." And then after some time, new different shapes are there. He said, "I'll come again and look at this. Can I take some photos so that I can make something like this?" So as you said, sometimes you would like something which is no longer there, but it is a design that you want to, because they are also artists, no? That design notion will also be there, but usually they collect it so that they can melt it and then make some jewelry, so recycle. Yeah, yeah, repair can take place. But in the case of coins, that is not. What kind of customization? Yeah, so we are talking about the coin hoard. Okay, so if it is, what if the coin hoard or the coin collection belong to a goldsmith? Then it would have had a different purpose. He would have collected it because he wants to melt it and then make fresh jewelry and circulate it in the market and do big business. So these are some of the ways in which, based on the contextual evidence, our interpretations tend to vary. I think we should have some time for interaction, right? So maybe we could skip this part, because maybe we can look at the last two points. The use of bow is more important than the arrow shot from it. That is what Child says. Look at the technology of the bow. If you have a good bow, then your aim will be good. So don't go after the arrow, go after the bow. Use it, look at the wheel, not thousands of pots are made on that wheel. Okay, so instead of looking at 10,000 pots, look at the wheel and study the wheel, study the technology better. The second point, the first business of archaeologists is to make finer distinctions within collections. Bulk of archaeological record is material culture. Okay. Now, coming to one slide on theoretical perspectives in Indian archaeology, a historical review. And this I have taken from Professor K. Padaya's book on theoretical perspectives and history of Indian archaeology, published by Archaeological Survey of India. So here he talks about the culture history paradigm, or the classificatory descriptive approach, where you are classifying collections and you are describing those collections. You are not explaining collections, you are describing collections. This was challenged by new archaeology in India. It was heralded by S.C. Malik, who was a student of B. Subbarao. B. Subbarao was a founder of the Department of Archaeology at Impss University of Baroda in Gujarat. Subbarao was a student of Deccan College, Pune, and he was a student of H.D. Sankalia. So I hope you have understood what is the connection. Sankalia, Deccan College. Padaya is now in Deccan College. He is an emeritus professor. I did my MA in Deccan College and I did my PhD in Baroda. Okay, so Subbarao is very famous. Though we don't know Subbarao much, actually Indian people in Kerala, they use the idea of Subbarao actually. That is, we all know foot, bruise foot. So bruise foot idea of isolation was there. He said Kerala does not have prehistory because Kerala is isolated because of rains, because of forest, because of the lack of raw material. These are some of the suggestions that he gave. If one person gives an opinion and we just don't question these opinions, be it even the opinions that I say or somebody else says or you say, the discipline will not improve. Okay, so Subbarao made a finer classification in his book titled Personality of India, in which he classified places into areas of attraction, areas of isolation, and areas of relative isolation. And Subbarao placed in Kerala under the area of relative isolation. So there is a move from foot to Subbarao. Okay, it is in this context that Sankalia asked P. Rajendran, R.V. Joshi. R.V. Joshi was the prehistory professor. P. Rajendran was a student and he wanted to do PhD. He was asked to work on the prehistory, to look for prehistoric in Kerala. That is how the first Paleolithic tool was found in Kerala. And today we have evidence, lot of Neolithic sites. Neolithic itself is questioned around the world. I also said how Neolithic revolution idea is also being questioned. So all this is being revisited, and this is an ideal time to think and rethink archaeology. Binford himself had come. Sankalia invited him to Deccan College to give a series of lectures on new archaeology or processual archaeology. At that time, it was called new archaeology by the traditional archaeologists. Okay, so there is this film, no. Kunyikunan film in which Dilip says, ആളുകൾ എന്നെ വിളിക്കുന്നത് കുഞ്ഞിക്കൂനൻ എന്നാണ്, ഞാൻ എന്നെ തന്നെ വിളിക്കുന്നത് ദിലീപ് കുമാർ എന്നാണ്, വിമൽ കുമാർ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ there are two names, processual archaeology and new archaeology. So the traditional archaeologists kind of says, oh, they are the new archaeology. Okay. And they are saying, no, what do you do? How do you call yourself? Why I call myself as processual archaeologist. See, that is the difference. I am studying processes, which means I am saying you are not studying process. You are only classifying and describing. Okay. Whereas I am explaining the process. So these differences were there. However, new archaeology or processual archaeology found a lot of supporters, found a lot of proponents and adherents in Indian archaeology as well. They highlighted the role of geographical factors, then the ideas of invasion, diffusion, migration, evolution, unilinear, multilinear. Okay, now Padaya also talks about the post-Orientalism or the Orientalism in reverse and indigenism, how these things have been reinvented. And he feels that as a result of all that, the European contribution to Indian archaeology has been diminished. So he is little bit critical and wary about it, and he tries to say that more credit is due to them, to the 19th century antiquarians who were working in India. And finally, after the processual archaeology, we have post-processual archaeology, which treats archaeological record as a text. Okay, so then in this book, Padaya also talks about um, the colonial Indology, which or the Orientalism, which he divides into the Madras school of Orientalism and the Bengal school. The Bengal school is very well known. Royal Asiatic Society of Bengal, William Jones, and how after the Indian Museum itself is actually the Royal Asiatic Society collection. And then you have in the 19th century again, you have Archaeological Survey of India being founded. So with that, the uh, archaeology becomes more organized, institutionalized, professionalized in the Indian context. Then post independence, it is taken up by various universities, and the work, as you know, after around 100 years, where it stands, you know. Okay, so that's it. This is a summary of what we did just now. So we can have some interaction. Thank you.
എന്താന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഇപ്പം ഒരു ആർക്കിയോളജി സൈറ്റിൽ നിന്ന് നമുക്കൊരു ആർട്ടിഫാക്റ്റ് കിട്ടിയിട്ട് അത് ഡേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനോ അല്ലെ ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാനോ പറ്റാണ്ട് വരുമ്പം പിന്നീട് അത് പ്രിസർവ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് പിന്നീടുള്ള കാലത്തെ ടെക്നോളജി വെച്ചിട്ട് അത് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഇൻസിഡന്റ് ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ടോ?
ഒത്തിരി ഇൻസിഡൻസ് ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണല്ലോ നമ്മളത് റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഇഫ് യു ആർ നോട്ട് ഷുവർ യു ആർ ആസ് ടു ഓൾവേസ് പുട്ട് എ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ മാർക്ക്, സോ ദാറ്റ് അടുത്തത് വന്ന് വീണ്ടും വായിക്കുന്ന ആളുകളുണ്ടല്ലോ, ദേ നോ ദാറ്റ് ദ കൺഫർമേഷൻ അത് കൺഫേംഡ് അല്ല എന്നുള്ളത്. അപ്പൊ ആ ഒരു പോസിബിലിറ്റി തന്നെ വീണ്ടും അത് റീവിസിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള സാധ്യത ഉണ്ടാക്കും. പലപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ കളക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന എല്ലാ മെറ്റീരിയലും ടോട്ടൽ റെക്കോർഡിംഗ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ തന്നെ നമ്മൾക്ക് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നതും പറ്റാത്തതും എല്ലാം കളക്ട് ചെയ്യണം എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ മൊത്തം സൈറ്റ് അല്ല എക്സ്കവേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, നമ്മൾ ഒരു 20% എക്സ്കവേറ്റ് ചെയ്താൽ മതി. പലപ്പോഴും പട്ടണത്തിന്റെ ഒക്കെ കേസിൽ ഞാൻ പലരും പറയുന്നത് കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്, സൈറ്റ് വളരെ കുറച്ച് എക്സ്കവേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളൂ. ഇത് നമ്മൾ എന്തുമാത്രം എക്സ്കവേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് നമുക്ക് ടൺ കണക്കിന് ടൂൾസ് കിട്ടേണ്ട ആവശ്യമില്ല. ഒരു ടൂൾ കിട്ടിയാൽ, ഒരു ചേര കോയിൻ കിട്ടിയാൽ നമുക്ക് ആ കോയിൻ ഇരിക്കുന്ന ആ കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റിലുള്ള എല്ലാം ഡേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ലേ? അപ്പോൾ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് ദ നമ്പർ, ക്വാണ്ടിറ്റി ഇസ് നോട്ട് വാട്ട് മാറ്റേഴ്സ്. അപ്പം ദ ഏരിയ ദാറ്റ് യു എക്സ്പ്ലോർ അത് മുഴുവനും എക്സ്കവേറ്റ് ചെയ്താൽ ദർ ഇസ് നോ പോസിബിലിറ്റി ഫോർ അനദർ പേഴ്സൺ ടു കം ആൻഡ് ദെൻ അന്നത്തെ ടെക്നോളജി ഉപയോഗിച്ച് കുറെ കൂടി ബെറ്റർ ആയിട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. എന്നും ഈ ടെക്നോളജി മാറിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണല്ലോ. ഇപ്പം ഞങ്ങളൊക്കെ പഠിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ സമയം സൈറ്റിന്റെ ലേ ഔട്ടിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ സ്പെൻഡ് ചെയ്യണത്. ഓക്കെ, 2010 മുസിരിസ് ഹെറിറ്റേജ് പ്രോജക്റ്റിൽ ഞങ്ങൾ ഇത്രയും വലിയ ഒരു 2 ഏക്കർ ഉണ്ടെന്ന് എൻ്റെ ഓർമ്മ, ഈ കോട്ടപ്പുറം കോട്ട, അതും ഇങ്ങനെ മൗണ്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ കുന്നുപോലെ, അല്ലാണ്ട് പ്ലെയിൻ ഫ്ലാറ്റ് പട്ടണം സൈറ്റ് നിങ്ങൾ കണ്ടതേ അതേപോലെ ആളുകളുടെ സെറ്റിൽമെന്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ ഫ്ലാറ്റൻഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ലാൻഡ് അല്ല. ഓക്കെ, ഇതിങ്ങനെ 1900s മുതൽ അത് പ്രൊട്ടക്റ്റഡ് സ്റ്റേറ്റസ് ഉണ്ട് കൊച്ചിൻ സ്റ്റേറ്റില്. പി അനുജൻ അച്ഛൻ ഡയറക്ടർ ആയിരുന്ന സമയത്ത് തന്നെ പ്രൊട്ടക്ഷൻ സ്റ്റേറ്റസ് അതിന് കിട്ടിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. പി അനുജൻ അല്ല, ട്രാവൻകൂറിന്റെ കീഴിൽ അത് വരിക. അപ്പൊ ട്രാവൻകൂറിന്റെ, അപ്പോൾ ആ സമയം മുതൽ ആ സൈറ്റ് അവിടെ പ്രൊട്ടക്റ്റഡ് ആണ്. അപ്പൊ അവിടെ ഞങ്ങൾ അവിടെ ഉപയോഗിച്ചത് നമ്മുടെ ടോട്ടൽ സ്റ്റേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന അത് നമ്മൾ ഡയറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ടല്ല ചെയ്യുന്നത്, അത് ഡ്രാഫ്റ്റ്സ്മെൻ ആണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ ട്രെഞ്ച് ലേ ഔട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നതിലൊക്കെ വലിയ വ്യത്യാസങ്ങൾ വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. പണ്ട് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്തിരുന്ന മെത്തേഡല്ല ഇപ്പൊ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത്. ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ലേസർ ടെക്നോളജി ഒക്കെ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത്, ലീഡാർ ടെക്നോളജിയാണ് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ ആ ഇപ്പൊ ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ നമ്മൾ ഇന്നിപ്പോ, പണ്ട് നമ്മൾ സർവേ ഓഫ് ഇന്ത്യയുടെ മാപ്പ് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നു, ടൊപ്പോഗ്രഫി ഷീറ്റ്. നമ്മളൊരു PhD ചെയ്യണമെങ്കിൽ ആദ്യം നമ്മൾ ഗവൺമെന്റ് ഓഫ് ഇന്ത്യക്ക് അപ്ലൈ ചെയ്ത് എനിക്ക് ഇന്ന ഏരിയ റിസർച്ച് ചെയ്യണം, അത് നമ്മുടെ ഈ ഡിഫൻസ് പർപ്പസസിന് വേണ്ടി നോട്ടിഫൈ ചെയ്ത സ്ഥലം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് അതിന്റെ ഓഫീസിൽ ചെന്ന് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ടോപ്പോഗ്രഫി ഷീറ്റ് അവർ തരും, അത് വാങ്ങിക്കാം നമുക്ക്. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ഉള്ള ഒരു കാലം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇന്ന് അതിന്റെ ആവശ്യമുണ്ടോ? ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ സൈറ്റിൽ പോയി നിന്നിട്ട് നമ്മൾ എന്താ ചെയ്യുന്നത്? ഗൂഗിൾ മാപ്പ് എടുക്കുക. ഗൂഗിൾ മാപ്പ് എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഗൂഗിൾ എർത്ത്, അത് വെച്ചിട്ട് നമുക്ക് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് പുഴ എവിടെ കൂടി ഒഴുകണേ, പലിയോ ചാനൽ എവിടെയുള്ളത്, ഇതെല്ലാം മനസ്സിലാക്കാം നമുക്ക്. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ ആ കാര്യങ്ങളിലും വ്യത്യാസം വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതിനനുസരിച്ചിട്ട് നമുക്ക് എക്സ്കവേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാതെ പോലും ഒത്തിരി ഡാറ്റ മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് സാധിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ ഇതിനകത്ത് കുറെ ക്യൂമുലേറ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഇതുണ്ട്. അതായത് നമ്മൾ ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് നമ്മൾ ഒരു സാധനം കാണുന്നു, ടോട്ടലി അൺറിലേറ്റഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സ്ഥലത്ത് വീണ്ടും അത് ആ വ്യക്തി കാണുമ്പോൾ ഒരുപക്ഷെ അയാൾക്ക് ഇത് രണ്ടും റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കും. അങ്ങനെ ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ട പലതും ഉണ്ട്. ഇപ്പം അതായത് ഒരു സ്റ്റെപ്പ് എന്ന് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടിരുന്നതാണ് ഒരു ടൂംബായിട്ട് ഞങ്ങൾ പിന്നീട് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്തത് കോട്ടപ്പുറത്ത്. കാരണം നമ്മളൊരു ടൂംബ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴേ നമ്മൾ എപ്പോഴും ഇമാജിൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത് നമ്മൾ കണ്ടിട്ടുള്ളതൊക്കെ വെച്ചിട്ടല്ലേ. അപ്പം നമ്മൾ ഇമാജിൻ ചെയ്യാത്ത തരത്തിലുള്ള ഒരു ടൂംബ് ആയിരുന്നു അത്. അപ്പൊ അതിന്റെ മുകളിൽ വെച്ചിരുന്ന ഒരു ലാറ്ററൈറ്റിന്റെ സ്റ്റോണാണ്. നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിൽ ഒരു ടൂംബ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ എന്താ കാണും? ഒരു മാർബിള്, ഗ്രാനൈറ്റ്, ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് നമ്മുടെ മനസ്സിലുണ്ടാവുക. അപ്പൊ ഈ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു സ്റ്റോൺ അത് ബിൽഡിങ്ങിന്റെ പാർട്ട് അല്ല എന്ന് എനിക്ക് തോന്നാൻ കാരണം അതിങ്ങനെ ഒരു ചെരിഞ്ഞിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പൊ ഇങ്ങനെ ഇതൊരു ബിൽഡിംഗ് ആണെന്ന് വിചാരിക്കുക, ഇങ്ങോട്ട് കയറാനുള്ള ഈ സ്റ്റെപ്പ് അങ്ങോട്ട് തിരിച്ചു വെച്ചാൽ അത് സ്റ്റെപ്പാന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റുമോ? സോ അപ്പം ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ഇത് എങ്ങനെ സ്റ്റെപ്പ് ആവുമെന്ന് എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലാവുന്നില്ല. കാരണം ഈ ബിൽഡിങ്ങും ഈ സ്റ്റെപ്പും തമ്മിൽ പ്രകടമായിട്ട് ഒരു ബന്ധവും കാണുന്നില്ല. ബട്ട് വേറെ നോ പോസിബിലിറ്റി, വേറൊരു ഓപ്ഷൻ നമുക്ക് അപ്പൊ ചിന്തിക്കാൻ വേറെ ഇല്ല. അതാണ് ഇപ്പൊ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ കേസ്. അപ്പം ഓപ്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത് വരെ നമ്മൾ ഇതിനെ ഡിസ്മിസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പാടില്ല. we must still hold on to that this does not appear to be the same. Then you look at all the features, അതിന്റെ ഫീച്ചർ നോക്കുക, അതിന്റെ ടെക്നോളജി എന്തുപയോഗിച്ചിട്ടാണോ ആ കല്ലിനെ ഡ്രസ് ചെയ്തേക്കണ ആ ടെക്നോളജി എന്താന്ന് നോക്കുക. മനസ്സിലായില്ലേ? അതിപ്പം ചോള പീരീഡിൽ ഉപയോഗിക്കണതല്ല പല്ലവ പീരീഡിൽ ഉപയോഗിക്കണേ. അപ്പൊ ഇതിന്റെ മൈന്യൂട്ട് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒബ്സർവേഷൻസ് നമ്മൾ നടത്തി നമുക്ക് അതുപോലെയുള്ള എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. ഇപ്പം ക്വാറി ഫീച്ചേഴ്സ് നമ്മൾ മെഗലിത്തിക് സൈറ്റുകളിൽ നിന്നൊക്കെ എത്ര എണ്ണം ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാതെ പോയേക്കണേ. ഓക്കെ, ഒന്നോ രണ്ടെണ്ണം ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്ത് കഴിയുമ്പോഴാണ് പിന്നെ ആളുകൾ എന്നാ ശരി ഇനി അടുത്ത സ്ഥലത്ത് ഒരെണ്ണം നമ്മൾ ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യണം. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പിന്നെ അത് പല സ്ഥലത്തുനിന്ന് റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യപ്പെടും. അതൊരു കാസ്കേഡിങ് ഇഫക്റ്റാ. കാരണം എന്താ വെച്ചാൽ ഇത് എന്താണെന്ന് ആളുകൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലായല്ലോ. ഇപ്പൊ ഞങ്ങൾ കോട്ടപ്പുറത്ത് തന്നെ ആദ്യം ഒരു ബോൺ കിട്ടി. താഴെ എക്സ്കവേഷനിൽ ബോൺ കിട്ടുമ്പോ ബോൺ ആണെന്ന് പോലും ആദ്യം തുടക്കത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ ബയോ ആർക്കിയോളജിസ്റ്റ് അല്ലല്ലോ, നമ്മൾ എല്ലാ മെത്തഡും പഠിച്ചു. ഒരു മെഡിക്കൽ ഡോക്ടർ എല്ലാ അസുഖവും പഠിച്ചു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അതെല്ലാം നമ്മുടെ മേത്ത് പ്രയോഗിച്ച് നമ്മൾ ജീവിച്ചിരിക്കോ? ഇല്ല. അപ്പൊ നമ്മളുടെ അസുഖം എന്താണോ അതിനുള്ള മാത്രമല്ലേ ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. സോ all these techniques you have studied of excavation, eventually when you are excavating you come across totally new things, different things. It's never the same. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ വന്നപ്പോ we had a feeling that this could be a burial. We got അവിടെ നിന്നൊരു ഇലസ്ട്രേഷൻ എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ മാപ്പ് പോലത്തെ പഴയ ഏർലി മോഡേൺ പീരീഡിലെ മാപ്പ് കിട്ടിയിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ മാപ്പിൽ കുറെ ഇങ്ങനെ ക്രോസ് പോലെ വരച്ചിട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. ഓക്കെ, സോ പീപ്പിൾ first impression was that these are all churches. Okay, so we thought, why do you need so many churches nearby? Okay, then later on now we believe that too many crosses nearby perhaps indicated a symmetry, and then all these things made some meaning, this tombstone, then that burial, and this map. It takes time. But then eventually you will be able to put all this jigsaw and fit, and then you will be able to better understand the past. That is what you do. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes a lot of effort also. Usually people don't realize the labor behind. People only see the result, and they think, you know, this may not be true. You know, it's very difficult to convince people. People don't simply believe that, you know, these things are possible in the past. We have got a very simplistic view about our past. That is the problem. So if we study well, then we will have great appreciation for our past. They were better than us. Look at how the Harappans mitigated climate change. They shifted to drought resistant crops. There was de-urbanization, and there was migration, rural. So we call it the localization phase. So there are now we are going through climate change. We are now having International Year of Millets. And the exactly same thing, that time, rice, wheat, these are all water intensive, so you can't use it. So then they shift to millets. Now if you go to Rajasthan, you go to Gujarat, you go to all those villages near these sites, they are still consuming millets only. So now we have been asked to, there are two studies are taking place in less water using, less water intensive crops, salinity resistant crops, drought resistant crops. Research is going on. So we can aid this kind of scientific research by giving them that these possibilities are there, you know. So go revisit those sites, pick up that ecofact, analyze it, find out the climate, find out the, you know, pollen studies. All this can be done. So you need to, there is no need to excavate everything. Excavate a small patch, that's enough. What is important is how much you save from it. Okay.
ഹലോ മാം, നല്ല ക്ലാസ് ആയിരുന്നു. ആർക്കിയോളജിയെ കുറിച്ചുള്ള ഒരു ഐഡിയ കിട്ടി, ബേസിക് ഐഡിയ കിട്ടി. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് പ്രധാനമായിട്ടും 3 ഡൗട്ടാണുള്ളത്. ഒന്നാമത് ആർക്കിയോളജിയുടെ ലിമിറ്റേഷൻസ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഓരോ ആർക്കിയോളജിക്കൽ സൈറ്റ്സിലുള്ള ആക്സസ് നമുക്ക് കുറയുമ്പോൾ ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന ലിമിറ്റേഷൻസ് എങ്ങനെ ആർക്കിയോളജിയെ ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് ചെയ്യാം. ഇപ്പോൾ ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ നമ്മൾ എടുക്കുകയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ 1947 ഇന്ത്യ പാകിസ്ഥാൻ പാർട്ടീഷൻ കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ ഈ ഹാരപ്പൻ കൾച്ചറുടെ ഒരു എക്സ്കവേഷൻ്റെ ഒരു മെയിൻ ലാൻഡ് നമുക്ക് മിസ്സായി പോയിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ പകരം നമ്മളപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു ലിമിറ്റേഷൻ വെച്ചിട്ട് ധോളാവീര പോലുള്ള സൈറ്റ്സ് വീണ്ടും ഡിസ്കവർ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ആ ലിമിറ്റേഷൻ എങ്ങനെ വേൾഡ് ആർക്കിയോളജിനെ ലൈക്ക് ഒരു ഇവന്റ്സ് അങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ടോ, ലിമിറ്റേഷൻസ് ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടോ? ഒന്നാമത്തെ ഡൗട്ട്. രണ്ടാമത്തെ എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ, ഈ നിങ്ങൾ മുസിരിസ് ഹെറിറ്റേജ് പ്രൊജക്റ്റിൽ വർക്ക് ചെയ്തെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ മെരിടൈം ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയനായുള്ള പായസ് മലക്കണ്ടത്തിൽ പറയുന്നത് പട്ടണമാണ് മുസിരിസ് ടൗൺ എന്ന് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ അതേ സെയിം ടൈം PK ബാലകൃഷ്ണ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയൻ പറയുന്നുണ്ട് പട്ടണമല്ല, മുസ്ലിംസ് ഒരു ബ്രോഡർ വ്യൂവിൽ കാണണം, ലൈക്ക് അത് കോയമ്പത്തൂർ ഭാഗത്തുള്ള എവിടെ ഒരു പട്ടണം ആയിരിക്കാം മേ ബി, അങ്ങനെയും പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അതിലുള്ളൊരു ഡിഫറൻസ് ഒന്ന് പറയാമോ? മൂന്നാമത്തെ ഡൗട്ട് എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ, ഇപ്പോൾ റീസെൻ്റ്ലി തമിഴ്നാട്ടിലൊരു പുതിയ ഫൈൻഡിങ്സ് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട് അയൺ ഏജിൻ്റെ. അപ്പോൾ അത് ബാക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്നത് ഒരുപാട് ഒരു വേൾഡ് തന്നെ ക്ലാസിഫൈ ചെയ്യുന്ന എതിരായിട്ടാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വേറെ ന്യൂ ഫൈൻഡിങ്സ് ആയിട്ടാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അതെങ്ങനെയാണ് ഒരു വേൾഡ് ഒരു അയൺ ഏജ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ ഒരു ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷനെ മൊത്തം ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്യുന്നത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ചലഞ്ച് ചെയ്യുന്നതെന്ന് എക്സ്പ്ലെയിൻ ചെയ്യും. താങ്ക് യു.
ഞാൻ ഒരെണ്ണമായിട്ട് എടുക്കാട്ടോ. 3 നല്ല ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ആണ്. ആദ്യത്തെ എന്തായിരുന്നു? ആർക്കിയോളജിയുടെ ലിമിറ്റേഷൻസ് എന്തൊക്കെയാണെന്ന് അല്ലേ? ആ ലിമിറ്റേഷൻസിനെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് അതിജീവിച്ചതെന്നൊക്കെയാണോ? അപ്പൊ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ അത് തന്നെ ഏറ്റവും നല്ലൊരു ഉദാഹരണമാണ്. ഹരപ്പ മോഹൻജോദാരോ പാകിസ്ഥാന്റെ ഭാഗമാകുമ്പോൾ ഇന്ത്യൻസിന് അവരുടെ ഒരു ഐഡന്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ് പോലെയാണ് അത് പലപ്പോഴും ആ സമയത്ത് റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടത്. അപ്പം പ്രീസ്റ്റ് കിങ് മോഹൻജോദാരോയിൽ നിന്ന് ലാഹോറിലേക്ക് മാറുമ്പോൾ, ലാഹോറിലേക്കായിരുന്നു എന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു അത് മാറ്റിയത്. മോഹൻജോദാരോയിൽ നിന്ന് തന്നെയുള്ള ദ സോ കോൾഡ് ഡാൻസിങ് ഗേൾ നമ്മുടെ നാഷണൽ മ്യൂസിയത്തിലാണ്, ഡൽഹിയിൽ ആണ് നാഷണൽ മ്യൂസിയത്തിലാണ് വെച്ചത്. ശരിക്കും ഈ ഹിസ്റ്ററി ഓഫ് ഇന്ത്യൻ ആർക്കിയോളജിയെ കുറിച്ച് വന്നിട്ടുള്ള പുസ്തകങ്ങളിൽ ഞാൻ പറയുന്ന ASIയുടെ ബേസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പബ്ലിക്കേഷൻസ് അല്ല, A ഘോഷിന്റെയോ BD ലാലിന്റെയോ ഒന്നും അല്ല. അതല്ലാതെയുള്ള DK ചക്രവർത്തിനെ പോലെയുള്ള ആളുകളുടെ സ്റ്റഡീസ് വന്നിട്ടുള്ളതിൽ ഈ ഒരു ഫിക്സേഷൻ, ഈ ഹരപ്പ മോഹൻജോദാരോയ്ക്ക് പകരം വെക്കാനായിട്ട് ഒരു സൈറ്റ് കണ്ടുപിടിക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു വ്യഗ്രത ഇന്ത്യൻ ആർക്കിയോളജിയെ ഭരിച്ചിരുന്നു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. സംഘാലി അടക്കമുള്ള ആളുകൾ അത് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതായത് വേറെ ഒന്നും നോക്കാൻ ഇത് മാത്രം പഠിച്ചാൽ മതി. പല ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ്സിൽ എന്ത് മാത്രം. ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ബറോഡ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി പഠിക്കുമ്പോൾ അവിടെ ഗുജറാത്തിലല്ലേ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ സൈറ്റ്. ഈ സൈറ്റ് മുഴുവൻ ഈ ഇൻഡിപെൻഡൻസിന് ശേഷം കണ്ടുപിടിച്ചതാണ്. 1960s നമുക്ക് രണ്ട് മെയിൻ ഇതാണ്. ഒന്ന് ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ ആർക്കിയോളജി, അതായത് നമ്മുടെ ഈ അലക്സാണ്ടർ കണ്ണിങ്ഹാം തുടങ്ങി വെച്ചതിന്റെ കണ്ടിന്യൂവേഷൻ, അത് ഒരു വശം കൂടി നടക്കുന്നു. മറുവശത്ത് ഹരപ്പൻ. എന്നാ ഇത് രണ്ടിലും നമ്മൾ സക്സീഡ് ചെയ്തു, കുറേ സൈറ്റുകൾ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ചു. അതിലാണ് പിന്നീട് ഫർമാന അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയുള്ള സൈറ്റുകൾ, പിന്നീട് രാഖിഗഡി, ഇതൊക്കെ പിന്നീട് എക്സ്കവേഷൻ ഒക്കെ അവിടെ നടക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. ധോളവീര ഇസ് എ വെരി ഗുഡ് എക്സാമ്പിൾ. അങ്ങനെയുള്ള പുതിയ സൈറ്റുകൾ കുറെ എണ്ണം കണ്ടുപിടിക്കപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ഇതിനകത്തുള്ള ചലഞ്ച് ഇപ്പം നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ ഒരു പോയിന്റ്, അതായത് പഴയ പോലെ നമുക്ക് ആർക്കിയോളജിക്കൽ സൈറ്റുകൾക്ക് ആക്സസ് ഇല്ല. ആർക്കിയോളജിക്കൽ സൈറ്റ്സ് ഡിസ്ട്രോയ് ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. അതിനെ നമുക്ക് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. 3 പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ട്. സൈറ്റ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. അപ്പൊ പിന്നെ നമുക്ക് ഈ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റൽ റീസൺസ് കൊണ്ട് നമുക്ക് കുറെ സൈറ്റുകൾ ലോസ് വരുന്നുണ്ട്. അതായത് 20 വർഷം മുമ്പ് നമ്മൾ പോയ സൈറ്റ് വീണ്ടും നമ്മൾ വിസിറ്റ് ചെയ്താൽ അവിടെ ഒന്നും ഉണ്ടാവില്ല. എന്നാ ഈ കോഴി എന്നാ എന്തിരുന്നോടത്ത് പൂടയില്ലെന്നാ പറയണേ, ഒരു സെയിങ് ഇല്ലേ, എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ നമ്മള് അവിടെ ചെന്നാൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു സൈറ്റ് ഉണ്ടെന്നുള്ളതിന് ഒരു മെറ്റീരിയൽ റിമെയിൻസ് നമുക്ക് കാണിക്കണ്ടേ. അപ്പോൾ വിച്ച് മീൻസ് നമ്മൾ ഇപ്പൊ ചെയ്യുന്നത് വളരെ സീരിയസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു എക്സസൈസ് ആയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കണം. പെർഹാപ്സ് വി ആർ ദ ലാസ്റ്റ് വൺസ് ടു വിസിറ്റ് ദാറ്റ് സൈറ്റ്. ആൻഡ് നമ്മൾ റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്യുമ്പം ഇനി വീണ്ടും അവിടെ പോകാൻ ഒരുപക്ഷെ സാധ്യത ഇല്ല എന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്യണം. അവിടെ നിന്ന് കിട്ടാവുന്നതെല്ലാം നമ്മൾ റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്യണം. പലപ്പോഴും കേരളത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്നത് സാൽവേജ് ആർക്കിയോളജിയാണ്, സയന്റിഫിക് ക്ലിയറൻസ് ആണ് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. നമ്മൾ അവിടെ ചെല്ലുമ്പോൾ അത് ഓൾറെഡി അവിടെ ഒരു പകുതിയോളം പണി കഴിഞ്ഞതിന് ശേഷമായിരിക്കും നമ്മൾ അവിടെ എത്തുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, അത് വളരെ വെൽ എസ്റ്റാബ്ലിഷ്ഡ് ആയ ഒരു മോണ്യുമെന്റിന്റെ അകത്തുനിന്ന് കിട്ടുന്ന ബെറിയൽ ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരാളുടെ പറമ്പിൽ നിന്ന് കിട്ടുന്ന ഒരു മെഗലത്തേക്ക് ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, എന്താണെങ്കിലും നമ്മൾ ആർക്കിയോളജിസ്റ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് ദ ഫസ്റ്റ് വൺ ടു റീച്ച് ദർ. ഓക്കെ, പിന്നെ ഇതിനകത്തുള്ളതെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഈ പ്രൊഫഷണൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അക്കാഡമിക്കലി ട്രെയിൻഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആളുകളും ട്രെയിൻഡ് അല്ലാത്ത ആളുകളും ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് പറയുന്ന അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ, അതും കുറെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കും. ഇപ്പൊ അതാണ് രണ്ടാമത്തെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യനുള്ള ആൻസർ. ഓക്കെ, ആര് പറയുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതല്ല, അവര് എന്ത് അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലാണ് പറയുന്നത് അത് പറയാമോ? പ്രൊഫസർ പയസ് മലയക്കണ്ടത്തിൽ എന്തിന്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിൽ പറയുന്നു? PK ബാലകൃഷ്ണൻ എന്തിന്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിൽ?
പയസ് മലക്കണ്ടത്തിൽ മെരിടൈം ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയൻ ആണ്. അപ്പൊ അദ്ദേഹം ട്രാവൽ നോട്ട്സും ഒക്കെ വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് പറയുന്നത്. പിന്നെ PK ബാലകൃഷ്ണൻ ഈ എന്താ പറയുക ടെമ്പിൾ ഓറിയന്റഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു റൈറ്റിംഗ്സിന് ക്രിട്ടിക് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തിയാണ്. അപ്പൊ അദ്ദേഹം അന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്ന ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയൻസ്, ഇപ്പോൾ എലങ്കുളം കുഞ്ഞമ്പിള്ള അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ ശ്രീധരൻ, അവരുടെയൊക്കെ റൈറ്റിംഗ്സ് വെച്ചിട്ട് അവർ ക്രിട്ടിക് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് ഈ ഫൈൻഡിങ്സിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുന്നത്. സോ അത് ക്രിട്ടിക് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് വരുന്നതാണ് PK ബാലകൃഷ്ണന്റെ ഫൈൻഡിങ്സ്. പയസ് മലക്കണ്ടത്തിൽ ഈ ഒരു ട്രാവൽ നോട്ട്സും മറ്റും വെച്ചിട്ട് പറയുന്നതാണ്.
ഇത് ഈ രണ്ടുപേരും പറയുന്നതായിരിക്കില്ല ഇതിനുള്ള എക്സ്പ്ലനേഷൻ. അതുകൊണ്ടാണല്ലോ അത് സെറ്റിൽ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റാത്തത്. നമ്മൾ കൊടുക്കേണ്ടത്, നമ്മൾ പറയുന്ന കാര്യത്തിന് കൺവിൻസിങ് ആയിട്ടൊരു ആർഗ്യുമെന്റ് നമുക്ക് കൊടുക്കാൻ സാധിക്കണ്ടേ. അത് പലപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ ഒരു ഹറി ബറിയിലൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ അത് ഒരു ഹാഫ് ബേക്ക്ഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെന്റ്സ് നമ്മൾ മേക്ക് ചെയ്യുമ്പോഴാണ് അത് പബ്ലിക് ഡൊമൈനിൽ വലിയ കോൺട്രവേഴ്സി ആയിട്ട് മാറുകയും പിന്നീട് നമുക്ക് അവിടെ ഒരു അക്കാഡമിക് ആയിട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ ഒത്തിരി പരിമിതികളിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ നീങ്ങുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നതെന്ന് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു. I don't think archaeologists who have worked in Pattanam have got any confusion related to the status of Pattanam. See, we are not talking about Muziris, we are talking about Pattanam. Pattanam is a site which we excavated. Okay, we are thinking that it has got certain remains that can be identified with an ancient city, port city known as Muziris. Now, there is no other site nearby which has got that kind of evidence. At the same time, I must say that we have not looked enough. When did we excavate Pattanam first? In 2004. First by Center for Heritage Studies. Then from 2007 onwards by KCHR. And then by PAMA. Then Archaeological Survey of India now. So almost 10-15 seasons we have worked. In these 15 seasons, did any of these agencies or any PhD scholar look at any place other than Pattanam? Did anybody? Not to my knowledge. So we should have also side by side investigated the surrounding regions and try to locate what are the early medieval remains that you are getting from Kottapuram. What about Valluvalli, which has got the Roman coin hoard, and other similar, contemporary periods. So that is what I feel about it. It's not who says, but what do you actually get from there? Okay. This is the only way by which you can actually build up an argument. And that brings us to the last one. What was the last question?
Iron Age new findings.
Yes. So now, the past 20 years, say 2025 years, 2000 onwards, we have been worried more about the transition from Iron Age to early historic. That is Iron Age to Pattanam, early historic Pattanam, and urbanism of early historic, etc. We were not looking at the transition from prehistory to Iron Age. Now here, Iron Age is being, the antiquity is pushed to 1000 BC. അപ്പോൾ 1000 BC എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ പ്രീ ഹിസ്റ്ററിയിലേക്ക് ഓൾമോസ്റ്റ് ഇത് ചെയ്തു എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ നിയോളിത്തിക്കിനോട് ഏകദേശം ചേർന്നു. ഇതൊരു പുതിയ കണ്ടെത്തൽ എന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. കാരണം നമുക്ക് വിദർഭയിൽ നിന്ന് കിട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ള അയൺ ഏജിന്റെ നേരത്തെ കിട്ടിയിരിക്കുന്ന ഡേറ്റ്സ് 800 BC ഉണ്ട്. പിന്നെ ഹല്ലൂരിൽ നിന്ന് കിട്ടിയിരുന്ന 1000 BC ഉണ്ട്, 1200 BC ഉണ്ട്. ആ ഒരു കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റിലേക്കാണ് ഇപ്പൊ ഇതിനെ ഒന്ന് നമ്മൾ പ്ലേസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ അവിടുത്തെ ആ ട്രാൻസിഷൻ, അയൺ ഏജ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ പ്രീ ഹിസ്റ്ററിയിൽ നിന്ന് ഏർലി ഹിസ്റ്ററിയുടെ ഇടയിൽ ഉള്ള ഒരു ടെക്നോളജിക്കൽ ഫേസ് എന്നുള്ള നിലയ്ക്ക് അതിൻ്റെ പഠനങ്ങൾ നേരത്തെ ഇരിക്കുന്നതിലേക്ക് ഈ പുതിയ ഫൈൻഡുകൾ കണ്ടെത്തപ്പെട്ടു എന്നേ ഉള്ളൂ. അതായത് ഇപ്പം നമ്മളിപ്പം ഡേറ്റ് എടുക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഈ ഒറ്റപ്പെട്ട ഡേറ്റുകൾ കിട്ടും. ഇപ്പം എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഈ 2000 കഴിയുമ്പോൾ എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഡേറ്റിംഗ്, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് കാർബൺ 14 ഡേറ്റിങ്ങിൽ ഒത്തിരി അഡ്വാൻസ്മെന്റ്സ് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമുക്കറിയാം 1960s C14 ഡേറ്റിംഗ് തുടങ്ങിയത്. ബട്ട് ഈ ലാബൊക്കെ വികസിക്കുമല്ലോ, നമുക്കറിയാലോ വിൻഡോസിന്റെ പഴയ ഒരു വേർഷനും പിന്നെ പുതിയ വിൻഡോസും തമ്മിൽ കോമ്പാറ്റബിൾ ആയിരിക്കില്ല. അപ്പൊ പഴയ ഡേറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമുക്ക് അതുമായിട്ട് ഇപ്പൊ കമ്പയർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല, അതാ പ്രശ്നം. അപ്പൊ അന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്ന ടെക്നോളജി വേറെയാണ്, ഇന്നുള്ള ടെക്നോളജി വേറെയാണ്. അപ്പൊ അന്നത്തെ ഡേറ്റിനേക്കാളും റിഫൈൻഡ് ആണ് ഇന്നത്തത്. അപ്പൊ ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ഈ AMS ഡേറ്റിംഗ് ആണ് വരുന്നത്. മാത്രമല്ല ലാബുകളുടെ നമ്പർ കൂടി. അപ്പൊ നമുക്കിപ്പം കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്ന് തന്നെ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ഈ 2000-ന് ശേഷം, അതിനു മുമ്പ് ഒരു 3-4 C14 ഡേറ്റ് ഉള്ളിടത്ത് ഈ കഴിഞ്ഞ 20 വർഷത്തിനുള്ളിൽ ഒരു 12 ഡേറ്റ്, ഒരു ഡസൻ ഡേറ്റ് എങ്കിലും വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയുള്ള വ്യത്യാസങ്ങൾ വരുന്നു. ഇതിനിടയിൽ ചില സൈറ്റുകളിൽ ഒറ്റപ്പെട്ടായിരിക്കും നമുക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ കിട്ടുക. ഇപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് അതിനെ തള്ളിക്കളയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. അത് തന്നെ നമ്മള് അതവിടെ റെക്കോർഡ് ചെയ്ത് വെക്കണം. ഇപ്പം ആനക്കരയെന്ന്, ഇവിടുന്ന് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് സോഷ്യൽ സയൻസസിൽ നിന്നാണല്ലോ ആനക്കരയുടെ മൈക്രോലിത്സ് കിട്ടിയിരിക്കുന്ന ലെയറിന്റെ ഡേറ്റ്, അതൊക്കെ ഈ ഏർലി പീരീഡിനെ സബ്സ്റ്റാൻഷിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ഡേറ്റുകൾ നമുക്കുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ മൈക്രോലിത്സ് പലയിടത്തുനിന്ന് റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ബട്ട് ഓൾ മൈക്രോലിത്സ് ആർ നോട്ട് മൈക്രോലിത്സ്. പ്രീ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിയൻസ് ഇത് സ്റ്റഡി ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളവർ പറയുന്നത് അവ നാച്ചുറലായിട്ട് അക്കർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ക്വാഡ്സിന്റെ ഇതാണ്. ടൂളായിട്ട് ചിലപ്പോൾ ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടാവാം, പക്ഷെ അത് ഒരു സ്കാർ അങ്ങനെയുള്ള നമ്മൾ സാധാരണ ഒരു ടൂൾ ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന ഇതൊന്നും അതിനകത്ത് അത്തരം പഠനങ്ങൾ നടന്നിട്ടില്ല. സീരിയസ് ആയിട്ട് അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള പഠനങ്ങൾ നടത്തണം. നമ്മുടെ പ്രോബ്ലം എന്താണെന്ന് നമ്മൾ ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്താൽ, ഇത് മൂന്നും കേരളത്തിന്റെ ഹിസ്റ്ററിയിലും ആർക്കിയോളജിയിലും ഉള്ള വലിയ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളാണ്. ഈ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളെ സോൾവ് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ട മെത്തേഡുകൾ, ഇഷ്ടംപോലെ മെത്തേഡ്സും ആളുകളും ഇന്ന് അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്, ടെക്നോളജി അവൈലബിൾ ആണ്, ഫണ്ടും ഒക്കെ കുറച്ചൊക്കെ ഒരു പക്ഷെ അവൈലബിൾ ആയിരിക്കും. ഇതിനെ ഇതിനെ ഇന്റഗ്രേറ്റ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് വർക്ക് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ഒരു ഗ്രൂപ്പ് വേണം, അതിനെ സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു സമൂഹം വേണം, പബ്ലിക് വേണം. ഇത് രണ്ടുമാണെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു എനിക്കിപ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ ഏറ്റവും ആവശ്യമായിട്ടുള്ളത്. നമ്മൾ ഒന്നാമത് ഇതിനെയൊക്കെ റിവൈസ് ചെയ്യാൻ തയ്യാറാവണം എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. അതിനുള്ള ഒരു മനസ്സുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു കൂടുതൽ ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ഐഡിയാസ് വരുമായി.
ആർക്കിയോളജിയുടെ ഫസ്റ്റ് ക്ലാസ് ആയിരുന്നു. ജെന്നി മാം ആദ്യമായിട്ടല്ല നമുക്ക് വരുന്നത്, ഇത് രണ്ടാമത്തെ തവണയാണ് ഇങ്ങനൊരു ടോക്ക് സീരീസിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് ജെന്നി മാം നമ്മുടെ കൂടെ വന്ന് ക്ലാസ് എടുക്കുന്നത്. ജെന്നി മാമിന് ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ളൊരു വാല്യുബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ടൈം തരികയും നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കുറെ നല്ല റിഫ്ലക്ഷൻസും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഒരു ആർക്കിയോളജിയുടെ ഒരു ബേസ് നമുക്ക് ശരിക്കും കിട്ടിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആദ്യം നമ്മൾ ക്ലാസ്സിലോട്ട് വരുമ്പോൾ അതിനെപ്പറ്റി ഒന്നും അറിയില്ല, ആർക്കിയോളജി എന്നൊരു ടേം അറിയാമെങ്കിൽ അറിയാവുന്ന മാത്രമാണ്, അതിനപ്പുറത്തേക്ക് അതിന്റെ ബാക്കി കാര്യങ്ങളൊന്നും അറിയുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. അപ്പൊ ഈ ഒരു വളരെ ചുരുങ്ങിയ സമയം കൊണ്ട് ഒട്ടും ബോറടിപ്പിക്കാത്ത രീതിയിൽ മിസ് ഞങ്ങളോട് എൻഗേജ് ചെയ്തു. IMBSന്റെ പേരിലും ഇവിടെ കൂടിയിരിക്കുന്ന സ്റ്റുഡൻസിന്റെ പേരിലുള്ള നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. ഇനിയും ഇതുപോലത്തെ വാല്യുബിൾ ടൈം നമ്മളായിട്ട് സ്പെൻഡ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള അവസരങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാവട്ടെ. മിസ്സിന് എല്ലാവിധ ആശംസകളും. ഇവിടെ കൂടിയിരിക്കുന്ന അതുപോലെ ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു അവസരം ഒരുക്കി തന്ന ലിൻഡ മാം, മറ്റ് ഫാക്കൽറ്റീസ്, അവരോടും ഈ ഒരു അവസരത്തിൽ നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുന്നു.